was having fun with other guys while my friends were cheering. Days later, my husband heard this.
Sometimes in life, we are faced with choices to do things that we might enjoy shortly, but will eventually ruin us in the long run. I know this now because just for a few hours of fun that I had at a bachelorette's party, I've ruined my marriage. I honestly don't know how to move on. My husband is very angry and I don't know how to pacify him. My name is Hillary and I am a 28-year-old woman. My husband Philip is a 27-year-old man and we've been married for 3 years. We live in the United States and we don't have any kids yet, as we just started trying to have some. I spotted Philip's profile on Tinder and we hit it off chatting. We talked for a few weeks, vibing on shared interests and laughs. Eventually, we figured, why not meet face to face? So we set up a date, and I remember walking into the restaurant. I hadn't dated in a while, so I was very nervous. I spotted Philip at a corner table. He flashed a friendly smile that instantly put me at ease. We said hi, laughed about the menu's quirky choices, and used that to break the ice. The place had this cozy vibe that made our conversations flow naturally, from childhood memories to favorite movies and the whole online dating scene. As the night rolled on, I got to know Philip better. His easygoing charm, genuine kindness, and a sense of humor that just clicked with mine. We dug into the appetizers, and with each exchanged glance, there was this unspoken connection growing between us. When it was time to say goodbye, there was this subtle shift in the air, and I knew that I was definitely seeing this man again, LOL. For our second date, Philip and I decided to ditch the usual dinner and a movie routine and opted for something a bit more offbeat, an art gallery adventure. Now, I'm not exactly an art connoisseur, but the idea of exploring vibrant canvases and quirky sculptures together sounded like a fun way to break the ice that was still between us. As we strolled through the exhibits, the artwork became a backdrop for conversations that were deeper than your average small talk. It was like the paintings were giving us an excuse to peel back layers and get to know each other on a whole new level. Philip's insights into art and life, in general, intrigued me. It wasn't just about the colors and shapes on the walls. It was about sharing perspectives, aspirations, and the little quirks that make us who we are. The art gallery, with its hushed tones and thoughtful gazes, we found ourselves discussing everything from childhood dreams to the weird and wonderful things that make us tick. It was surprising how a collection of art pieces could act as a catalyst for us to open up in ways that hadn't happened on our first date. After absorbing all the creativity, we decided to keep the night alive with a spontaneous visit to a nearby food truck. No fancy dinners, just some street food goodness. The change in atmosphere from the refined elegance of the gallery to the laid-back charm of the food truck created a cool contrast. We sat on a bench, sharing bites of our unconventional meal choices, and the laughter flowed just as freely as it did among the gallery's hallowed halls. What struck me about that night was the ease with which we transitioned from one setting to another. It wasn't about impressing each other with our knowledge of art or fine dining etiquette. It was about enjoying the experience together, finding joy in the simple act of trying something new. I realized that Philip and I could find common ground not just in our tastes, but in our ability to appreciate the beauty in unconventional places. After dating for a while, we decided to take the next step and move in together. In our new place, Philip and I dove headfirst into the nitty-gritty of living together. Mornings were a hilarious bathroom scheduling challenge, and the kitchen was like a fusion of our cooking styles and tastes. Amid our laughter and occasional spats, getting the hang of shared responsibilities was a joint effort. We tackled chores together and hashed out decisions about furniture and decor. It wasn't all smooth sailing. We had our fair share of arguments, but each disagreement became a chance for us to understand and grow, both as individuals and partners. I remember our cozy private moments. Lazy Sunday mornings with breakfast in bed and quiet nights on the couch brought us even closer, finding solace in the simple joy of being together. The day Philip popped, the question caught me off guard, but turned out to be a moment I'll never forget. We were at this quiet beach we both loved, where we'd shared a bunch of good times together. The day kicked off with a feeling that something special was in the air, LOL. As we walked along the shore, the waves provided a chill soundtrack, and I couldn't help but notice Philip acting a bit jittery but excited. As the sun started to set, we ended up at this spot with candles and blankets. Kind of romantic, right? Philip started pouring his heart out, talking about all the good stuff we've been through. His words were a mix of vulnerability and honesty, painting this picture of us facing life's adventures side by side. Then, with a glint in his eye, Philip got down on one knee, pulled out a little box, and opened it to reveal a shiny ring. The world seemed to freeze as he popped the big question, and I felt a whole bunch of emotions: happiness, excitement, and the realization that this was a big, beautiful beginning. The proposal was simple but special, just like us. It wasn't about some fancy setup. It was about Philip choosing me for the long haul. With happy tears in my eyes, I said yes. Philip and I hugged, sealing the deal on a future together. In the moments that followed, we sat watching the stars come out. I remember meeting Philip's parents for the first time ever. It felt like a big deal, a mix of excitement and nervousness that had me wondering how it would all go down. We decided to hang out at Philip's family home, a comfy spot filled with memories and that homely smell you get from good cooking. Walking up to the front door, I was a bit jittery. Despite Philip saying his parents were chill, I couldn't help those butterflies in my stomach. But as soon as the door opened, his mom and dad gave me these warm hugs that made me feel right at home. The house was decked out with family photos, and the smell of some seriously good home-cooked food filled the air. Philip's parents were awesome hosts, making the whole vibe easygoing and perfect for chatting. We gathered around the dining table, loaded with homemade goodies, and swapped stories about where we came from, what we liked, and all the stuff we'd been through with Philip. Listening to Philip's parents share stories about his childhood added this cool layer of understanding. I got to see the family dynamic, catching on to their inside jokes and seeing the love they had for each other. It was clear that family was a big deal for Philip, and getting the invite into that world felt pretty special. As the night rolled on, I found common ground with Philip's parents. We shared values and had this mutual respect for the awesome person we all cared about. Any initial worries I had about making a good impression faded away as we dove into genuine talks about life, love, and what the future might hold. When it was time to leave, saying goodbye, I couldn't help feeling grateful for how welcoming Philip's parents had been. It wasn't just about meeting them, it was like a glimpse into the background of where Philip came from, and feeling more connected to the roots that made him who he is. Planning our wedding was a wild ride, filled with excitement, dreams, and a fair bit of stress. From imagining the big day to dealing with unexpected hiccups, it puts our love and patience to the test. In the early days, we were pumped about our dream wedding. Late-night talks revolved around themes, venues, and who'd make it to the guest list. Friends and family backing us up gave us a boost, making those initial stages feel like a breeze. But when the planning wheels started turning, so did the stress. Picking a venue turned into a puzzle, where our ideas clashed and family expectations added another layer. Finding a compromise that worked for both sides became a real skill. Money matters kicked in too. Our dream celebration bumped against the reality of wedding costs. Talks about priorities, how many guests to invite, and finding the sweet spot between grand and simple became a daily thing. Sorting out the guest list, which sounded fun at first, got tricky. Balancing the desire for a big celebration with keeping it intimate meant making tough calls that sometimes tugged at the heartstrings. Unexpected issues popped up, from problems with vendors to family conflicts and the pressure of meeting everyone's expectations. Each challenge tested our relationship, forcing us to tackle things together and rely on each other. Then came the nitty-gritty details: dress fittings, flower choices, and food tastings. Juggling work, family stuff, and all the wedding prep needed serious time management and dedication. But in the middle of all the chaos, there were some seriously magical moments. Picking our vows, imagining our first dance, and thinking about the lifetime of memories we'd create became the anchors that kept us going. Friends and family, too, were with us every step of the way. Our wedding day was a whirlwind of emotions, laughter, and heartfelt moments that made it feel like our love story was coming to life, LOL. From the early hustle and bustle of getting ready with my bridesmaids to the late-night party, every part of the day added another chapter to our story. The morning kicked off with a mix of excitement and a touch of nerves. While getting ready, there was this lighthearted vibe, filled with laughter and stories that set a cheerful tone. The air smelled like flowers, and there was this sweet anticipation as everything fell into place. The venue, decked out in our favorite colors and personal touches, turned into a visual representation of our journey. The aisle, where I was about to walk into a life together, felt like the symbolic path we were choosing. Our families and friends started gathering, creating a cozy atmosphere of familiarity and love. The ceremony itself was a roller coaster of emotions. Saying our vows and swapping rings felt like time standing still. The carefully chosen words were laced with sincerity, creating a special space where our commitment unfolded. The love and support from our folks and friends wrapped us in a comforting blanket. Moving on to the party was seamless. The reception hall buzzed with music, laughter, and the sound of toasting glasses. Our first dance as a married couple and the heartfelt speeches added depth to the day. The food, made with love, wasn't just a treat for our taste buds, but for our hearts too. In the midst of the celebration, we stole a few quiet moments to soak it all in. The journey that led us here, the hurdles we faced, and the amazing people around us became part of the story. The dance floor turned into our personal stage, surrounded by the smiling faces of those who had been there through it all. As the night unfolded, you could feel a sense of accomplishment and the start of something new. The shared laughs, happy tears, and tight hugs became the stitches weaving into the fabric of our wedding day. It was a big love party, a sum up of the moments that shaped our journey, and the promise of many more memories ahead. Our honeymoon felt like stepping into a dream after all the wedding craziness. We picked a chill spot, a tropical island with beaches and greenery, for some R&R and adventure as a newlywed duo. Getting there was like a buzz of excitement. Boarding the plane, we were itching to escape to this secret paradise we'd chosen. Arriving at the resort was like hitting the jackpot. The smell of flowers and the sound of waves made it feel like a luxury cocoon. Our room had this amazing view of the blue waters, the perfect backdrop for our private retreat. Days on the island were a mix of lazy vibes and exploration. Mornings meant chilling on the beach, sipping cocktails, and enjoying the freedom of having no plans. Afternoons were for snorkeling, finding cool spots, and soaking up the local vibes. Evenings were all about us, romantic dinners under the stars, tasting the island's flavors. Laughing together, stealing glances, and quiet moments under the moon became memories we'll carry forever. One standout was a sunset cruise. The sky turned into a crazy mix of colors as the sun set, and sailing along the coast hand in hand felt like our own little magic moment. Our honeymoon was also a time to talk and connect. Long walks on the beach turned into heart-to-heart chats, where we spilled dreams, plans, and all that jazz. With no daily grind, we soaked up each other's company without distractions. As the days rolled on, the locals, super friendly, added a realness to our trip. Their stories shared during tours and market visits gave us a taste of the place and its people. Leaving the island meant saying bye to our honeymoon, but the memories stuck like glue. After our dreamy honeymoon, reality kicked in, and we found ourselves back home, settling into the routine of married life. With Philip earning well, I decided to embrace the role of a stay-at-home mom. After a few years of being married, about 3 to be exact, my good friend Angela dropped the bombshell. She said yes to her boyfriend's proposal. The excitement radiated from her as she happily spilled the beans about their wedding plans. Angela, who had been a rock during my own wedding, threw the bridesmaid invite my way for her big day. Remembering all the times Angela had been there for me, I gladly jumped at the chance to return the favor and stand by her side. Playing the role of a bridesmaid turned out to be a heartfelt adventure. From tackling wedding prep to hitting up dress fittings and organizing the bachelorette bash, each task was loaded with shared memories and the bond we'd built over the years. However, the day it all went wrong was the bachelorette party. Angela was always the wild and lively one in our group, injecting fun and good vibes whenever we hung out. So, when it came to planning her bachelorette party, it was no surprise that she suggested hitting up a club for a wild night out. I was totally on board for Angela's bachelorette idea, especially since tying the knot with Philip meant my clubbing days took a back seat. I love my hubby, but he's more on the steady and reliable side, not exactly the party animal. So the thought of hitting the club again had me genuinely pumped. I made a deal with myself to keep things easy, not go overboard on drinks, just soak in the vibes. Of course, I didn't spill the beans to Philip about the club part. I figured if I did, he'd probably veto the whole plan. Since I was all in for a night out, I just told him the girls and I were organizing a classic girls' night for Angela's bachelorette. He didn't pry much, which was just what I needed for my little plan. Once we hit the club, my grand plan of not drinking much quickly went out the window. I tried to keep it on the low, soaking up the good times with my friends. Being back in the club scene after a while felt like a blast, even though there were some new things I wasn't used to. But you know how it goes. A few minutes in, my friends started pushing me to have more drinks. They argued it was a joyous occasion and, well, I wanted to join in the fun while staying somewhat sober to avoid any silly moves. So, against my initial plan, I gave in and started knocking back a few more drinks. You know how it usually unfolds? One drink led to another, and soon enough, I was on a roll. Feeling all the good vibes, I kept sipping, and, well, I went a bit overboard. Next thing you know, I found myself doing some pretty silly stuff. At this point, my friends and I were pretty deep into the whole drunk scene, daring each other to pull off ridiculous stunts. It was like, hey, go peck that guy, or why not ask that dude for his number? It was one of those nights. At that point, my friends tossed in another dare go over to some random guy and dance with him. I figured, why not? It seemed harmless enough, just a bit of dancing. Well, turns out it wasn't as harmless as I thought. Things took a turn, and I ended up grinding on this guy, and it only got worse. My friends cheered me on while I full-on groped, kissed, twerked, and grinded on a random guy. I kept at it for a while, grinding and dancing with different guys throughout the night until I got bored and moved on to another. The next morning, I woke up with the craziest headache. My head was pounding. Despite the hangover, the memories of the previous night hit me and I felt horrified. The thought of telling Philip crossed my mind, but then I hesitated. I had already fibbed about the whole girls' night thing, and besides, I didn't really cross any major lines. I never went all the way with the guy, so I figured it wasn't worth spilling the beans. So it turned out I wasn't the only one having second thoughts. The girls and I made a pact. What happens at the club stays at the club. We promised not to spill the beans to anyone else, and that was that. Fast forward to Angela's wedding, and it was an absolute dream. The whole event was breathtaking, and we had a blast. The food was on point, the vibe was fantastic. In a nutshell, it was a beautiful celebration. A few weeks post Angela's wedding, life was chugging along as usual. The girls and I weren't catching up as often due to our busy schedules, but we had an outing planned for next week, so that was something to look forward to. I was at home when Philip walked in, a bit irked and distant. I figured maybe someone at the grocery store had rubbed him the wrong way, so I didn't think much of it. As the days went by with Philip keeping up the standoffish attitude, it started to bother me more. His cold demeanor persisted for about 3 days. One-word answers, avoiding eye contact, and I couldn't help but wonder what I might have done to trigger this. Eventually, I decided it was time to confront him and get to the bottom of it. When I mustered the courage to ask Philip if I had done something to upset him, he flat out denied it. It was pretty clear he was lying given his icy behavior. I pressed him again, and all he did was laugh it off. Frustration building, I told him to cut the nonsense and just spill it. That's when he dropped the bomb. He couldn't understand how he was supposed to smile at me when everyone in town was labeling me as a hoe. Our town was one of those small, tight-knit communities where everyone knows everyone. Gossip spreads like wildfire in such places. Hearing Philip mention that people in town were calling me names was genuinely shocking. I racked my brain, trying to think of anything that might have caused such rumors. But apart from the club incident, nothing else came to mind. The puzzling part was figuring out how details from the club, which was a bit of a distance away, had made their way into the ears of folks in our town. Small towns have their drawbacks, and the speed at which rumors travel is definitely one of them. Philip didn't need to ask if the rumors in town were true. The shock on my face pretty much gave away my guilt. I attempted to explain that I hadn't done anything wrong, and even asked him what exactly people were saying. Philip was not just angry, but also more irritated than ever. He told me people in town were calling me names because a video of me at the strip club with the girls had been leaked, and no one knew which girl was behind it. I was on the brink of tears. I knew I had made a colossal mistake. It hit me that Philip might never forgive me. Not only had I lied about what the girls and I were up to that night, but I had also cheated on him. I tried desperately to defend myself, emphasizing that I hadn't slept with the guy and hadn't gone all the way. But Philip wasn't having it. He insisted that just grinding on the guy was enough to qualify as cheating. I pleaded with him, explaining that I was drunk and wouldn't have done something like that if I had been sober. Philip dropped the pretense of being okay. I realized that the cold treatment over the past 3 days was his way of waiting for me to ask, so he could unleash his frustration. He didn't hold back. He demanded that I leave the house, and he declared that we were heading for a divorce. His words were harsh, branding me as a loose woman, and he affirmed that the people in town were right in their judgment. In the midst of tears, I found myself offering apologies repeatedly, feeling utterly helpless with no words to defend myself. It became clear that Philip wasn't open to listening, so I gathered my belongings and left. Sobbing, I ended up going back to my parents' house, seeking solace and a temporary place to stay. The disappointment from my parents was palpable, and it wasn't any different when Philip's parents got wind of the situation. Regret weighed heavily on me, and it must have been evident because my parents took it upon themselves to reach out to Philip. Despite his lingering anger, they attempted to talk to him. Philip, initially resistant, eventually agreed to listen after a few days when he had calmed down a bit. Despite my parents' efforts, Philip expressed that forgiveness was impossible. He conveyed to my parents his decision to seek a divorce, stating that the embarrassment and shame he experienced from watching a video of his wife with another man would be indelibly etched in his mind, and that he would never forget it. Even when my parents suggested couples therapy, Philip firmly asserted that it wouldn't be able to mend the damage, and he had no intention of reconciling. Even though I was bawling my eyes out and practically on my knees begging, Philip wasn't having any of it. He stuck to his decision, telling me it was over between us. It's kind of messed up, but finding out I'm not the only one facing backlash oddly gives me a bit of comfort. Angela, who just got married, is dealing with her leaked video too. It's like a domino effect, messing with relationships left and right, some on the verge of breakups, others hitting up couples therapy, and some flat out heading for divorce. Philip didn't hold back. He emptied our joint account, taking almost everything since he was the sole provider and I was a stay-at-home mom. He left me with very little, and now I'm just waiting for the divorce papers he promised to send over. Dealing with Philip's parents has been tough. They reached out, and their disappointment is palpable. The gossips in this town have been relentless, with snide comments coming at me from all directions. Once the divorce is officially done, I'm seriously considering leaving this place for a fresh start. Sharing my story is a way to find some peace of mind amidst the chaos. If someone out there is contemplating cheating, I hope they stumble upon this and make the wise decision to steer clear of that path. Thank you for listening. You know, I am sharing this story because I can't forget about it, and it keeps coming back. I love my husband so much, and I hold him in very high regards. But you know, sometimes having a male friend can sometimes bring some uncertainty and trust issues in a relationship. I am also not a saint. I have my fair share of flaws, and I have done my husband wrong. I mean, we should have sat down as adults and discussed everything and not act irrational like he did at first. I need advice, what I should do in this situation. How do I deal with this? And please give me tips for future purposes so I won't repeat the same mistake again. My husband, male 26, and I, female 25, met on social media, well, on Facebook to be specific. Well, he had sent me a friend request one day, and usually I do not accept friend requests from people I do not know. But that day, as I was scrolling through my phone, all bored and cooped up in the house, I found myself accepting his request. Well, not before I checked his account, and if he was a catfish or a real person, after I had confirmed that I accepted his request. Within any minutes, the guy sent me an inbox message on Facebook Messenger. So as we were chatting, he complimented my pictures and told me that he had seen my location, since I would usually put my location whenever I post my pictures, and my bio mentioned that I lived in Island Bridge and Parkgate Place apartments. He told me that he lived in Bellevue, which was about 18 minutes walk and 4 minutes drive away. We continued chatting. He was actually a very fun person. So as we were in the same town, he asked to meet up with me at least. A few days later, we met at Rai's Chinese takeaway restaurant that had recently opened around the corner. When we met, he was actually finer than in the pictures. Not to say he was ugly in the pictures or something. He was handsome, very handsome, but seeing him live. We were already friends. He was a good listener and a very good advisor to have. He was a very fun person to be around with. Our energies clicked, We got along very well. But there was one thing that I had noticed about him was that he had a very short temper, and you had to be careful of what you say to him, even if it's a joke. And another thing, it was like he had some kind of trust issues. He was not a very trusting person. I once asked him about his trust issues and temper. He told me his story about his ex-girlfriend who had made him take responsibility of a child that was not his, and the story about his parents, that his mother was not faithful to his father, and a lot would happen in the house, which somehow led to violence in front of him. That was when he had developed trust issues and a very short temper. When he told me his story, I couldn't believe it, and I promised to be there for him no matter what, and that I would never betray him, at least not intentionally. A month later, he confessed his feelings for me. Well, I had also developed some feelings for him. He was what my soul needed, The chemistry and the spark was there, so the relationship was formed. He would tell me that he loved me every single minute he got, and would make me promise that I would never betray him. From there, I knew that my baby needed help. Maybe some therapy would help him. So I tried talking to him about seeking help, but he bluntly refused and told me that he would never speak to a person he doesn't know about his problems. Men and their egos sometimes, so I just let him be. We worked so hard to fix the issues that he had, but eventually we conquered it all. I was grateful for the fact that he had allowed me to help him get through everything and somehow be able to forgive and move on. So after like a year later, we got married, and it was the best day of our lives. Since we both had no parents or any relatives of some sort, we celebrated our big day with friends and colleagues. Well, I grew up in a foster home, so I don't really know if my parents are still alive or not, and it always saddens me that I had grown up in a foster home without any trace or names of my parents. It's like they had never existed, But life has to move on, right? And besides, we can't always worry ourselves about people who never bothered to look for us, who actually forgot that they had or have children. Anyway, enough about my somber and boring story. So after Frank and I got married, he was a changed man. He was ready to be a family man, His tempers had gone down, and I was very much happy with the changes. Our house was full of happiness and love. Even our intimate moments were on another level. I was a happy woman. I lacked nothing. From love, happiness, handsome husband, beautiful home, and everything, but I don't really know what had come over me to destroy all of that good thing. So I had a male best friend that I had actually taken as my brother. Kristen and I were in a foster home together. By grace and his luck, he was adopted by some rich parents, but later reunited with his father. So life was fortunate for me, and that was how we lost each other. But later reunited when we were both in university, I was so happy to get a chance to be united with Kristen again. Since then, we became inseparable. Frank, my husband, had his own doubts about my friendship with Kristen, but I would always assure him that there was nothing more that was going on between us. It was just a purely brother and sister relationship. Not knowing that I was just fooling my mind and Frank's mind, Kristen actually had his own thoughts about our friendship relationship. And it didn't end very well because I betrayed one person who was able to accept me into his world and heart and make me his without feeling insecure about it. And what did I do to appreciate that? I acted like a loose witch. I hate myself sometimes for what I did. I regret it. After a year of being married to Frank, we started talking about having kids. Well, it was also my dream to have kids with Frank. But I first wanted to boost my modeling career, so I asked if we would wait a little because at that time I had entered for Miss Ireland competition. He had his career and life all figured out. And I also wanted that, He had already had a legacy, an inheritance, but I didn't. And when I told him my reason to that, he got angry, of which confused me because despite that, he wanted to start a family. And I wanted that too, but he didn't understand my reasons of wanting to wait maybe another year of starting a family. And I didn't understand why. I mean, what was the rush? It wasn't like I would be in the competition forever, That modeling competition news was not sitting well with him. I don't know if it was maybe because I was working with Kristen most of the time since he was a photographer, so he was the one who would usually take pictures of me. I tried reasoning with him that modeling was what I love. It had started as more of a hobby, and I started loving it to a point that I had even thought of pursuing a career in the industry. Yes, I was working as a receptionist in one of the law firms in Dublin, name withheld due to personal reasons, but it wasn't something I had dreams to be in. So Frank became distant and would sometimes not come back home. I didn't know if the reason why his behavior had changed towards me was because of me wanting to pursue my modeling career, or because he had his own things that he was not telling. But I had put that aside because I trusted my husband, and I knew that he wouldn't do me dirty or do something that would destroy and jeopardize what we were trying to build. He loved me too much to put our relationship in jeopardy. But instead, I was the one who had put our relationship and marriage in the state where it is now. I wonder what really came over me. One sunny weekend, Frank came back home in the afternoon. Mind you, he had been gone for 3 days without even bothering to call me. I asked where he was coming from. The answer I got was, "I am trying to pursue my career also, since you don't want us to start a family." That response shook me because I didn't expect it from him. He was slowly going back to being his old short-tempered self. I wondered what had driven him back to that state that we had worked so hard to conquer, but I just let it slide and hoped that he would tell me when he was ready. During that time when my husband was busy acting up, I started spending more time with Kristen. Well, Kristen was what I can call a great time passer. He helped me pass time when my husband was super distant from me and our marriage. I was going through a lot, you know. I knew my husband loved me, but his behavior was stressing me out, to a point that I would even find myself venting in Kristen. I know it was wrong of me to just put my marital problems out there or share them with a friend or an outsider, but I needed someone to vent to, and Kristen was there and available. Time passed. I continued spending more time with Kristen, up until Frank saw that I was no longer staying at home for long. He figured that I was spending time with Kristen, so he asked why I was spending more time with Kristen. And the stupid Casey myself lied and told him that Kristen and I were preparing for the Miss Ireland competition, so that was why I had been with Kristen most of the time as my photographer, of course. I knew he didn't believe me, but there was no evidence that showed that there was something going on between Kristen and I. But I knew that there was actually something going on between Kristen and I. I just couldn't tell my insecure and short-tempered husband that during the time when he was an absent husband to me. I had found solace in Kristen because he was there to listen to my venting sessions, and he was what I can call a shoulder to cry on. So, as I was busy venting on Kristen, I didn't know that he had his own agenda. He actually pretended to be my brother, my best friend, and my shoulder to cry on. Weeks later, as my husband was busy pulling his stunts, Kristen and I kissed. I managed to break it at first and reminded him that I was a married woman and I shouldn't have done what I did. Instead of respecting my decisions, the guy just poured his heart to me, telling me how much he had thought him and I would actually end up together, married and having kids. His confession confused the sheesh tea out of me, because I had thought our relationship was of a brother and I, but he actually saw a life partner to me. I mean, he had all the time in the world to tell me that when I was single and available. So why would he confess when I was married and during the time when my marriage was going through a patch? After that, I couldn't face him for like a week. Then he came back. Well, he came to my house. He actually came to apologize and blamed his confession to the alcohol that we were drinking that day. As a person that I had thought was my best friend, my brother, I forgave him and gave him another chance to continue where we had left off. Not knowing that the vulture was actually back for me, I don't know how and what I can call it, but he actually destroyed my marriage. And another thing, Frank had told me several times to stay away from Kristen because he had started acting like an obsessed person, but I didn't listen. But instead I gave him the benefit of the doubt and thought that my husband was looking at things out of proportion. I thought he was exaggerating, you know. I knew that he didn't like my friendship relationship with Kristen from the day I introduced them to each other, and I used that to close Frank's judgments towards Kristen. So one day my husband and I had a very heated argument about the fact that I wanted to wait for a year to start a family or have kids. That day he lashed out on me to a point that he even told me that he had thought I was different from his ex-girlfriend, and he had thought I knew what I wanted when I first got into relationship with him and agreed to marry him. He even asked if I was cheating on him with Kristen since I was always with him. After that heated argument, he went out to only God knows where. I was so heartbroken by what he said. His words were stuck in my head to a point that I found myself calling Kristen and asked to spend the night with him, as friends, of course, of which he agreed. I was in mixed emotions. I didn't know what to do with myself, you know. My other side was angry at Frank for comparing me with his ex, and his words were like a deep stab in my heart. I was also frustrated at the fact that he didn't understand my reasons for why I wanted to pursue my career first before having any children. So that night, as I went to Kristen's flat, he automatically knew what I had needed, and that was alcohol. We drank. I wanted to numb the pain I was feeling inside my heart and forget everything that Frank had said earlier on, so drinking like a fish was the only option I had. Kristen decided to offer me a weed joint that we smoked together, and it did make a trick because most of the things I did or said there I don't really remember. So we smoked and drank. I was having the best time of my life with my ex-male best friend. As we were having fun, I felt a sense of peace and belonging, and one thing led to another. I remember kissing Kristen. The music he was playing made me miss the intimate sessions I would have with my husband, which somehow changed from fire to ice. Ever since he wanted to start expanding the family and I didn't agree, his intimacy game dropped to the ground, and I was suffering. You know, the weed was in my head, the alcohol fully in my system, as we were kissing with Kristen. Things got heated to a point that clothes started flying and we couldn't hold ourselves, so we did the deed. The next morning came and regret came crashing over me. I realized what I had done and left Kristen's house like I was chased by dogs. I was scared that Frank would find out, and what I did somehow made me think that what he said when he compared me to his ex-girlfriend was somehow true, and it did eat me up. I didn't know what to do with myself. I wished to just go to the ocean or to the river Liffey so I can wash away the sin that I had committed. I realized that I had put my marriage in jeopardy, all because I couldn't give my husband what he wanted and ended up finding solace to drugs that led me to be unfaithful to my husband. Days later, Frank had been home, and he apologized for how I had behaved and told me that he didn't mean to compare me to his ex. But he was under pressure because he really wanted to have children and build his own family since he doesn't have one. I understood his reasoning, but the guilt was there, you know. I mean, how you tell your husband that you have cheated. And I prayed that Kristen doesn't say anything or do anything stupid that would make Frank find out about my abomination and shame that I had done. Little did I know that the bastard had captured every moment of that night. So about a week later, I received mail, which was very odd because all communications are done technologically nowadays, so I took the mail, wanting to find out what it was. Maybe it would have been my parents finally reaching out, not knowing that it was a very big and destructive bomb. As I opened the mail, I found the letter written, "The night I would never forget, I hope we do it again soon." And it was from Kristen. I got the shock of my life as to why would Kristen do this to me. My heart was beating too fast, thoughts running through my head. I was asking myself, what if Frank was the one who got the mail, and he saw the pictures and a letter that Kristen had sent? I sent Kristen a text right away and broke everything off with him. I wanted nothing to do with him because he had started acting like a psycho. As I was busy, lost in my thoughts, I heard the car door opening and I knew that it was Frank. So I took the mail along with everything that Kristen had put in the mail and threw it in a trash can. When Frank came in, he found me drinking wine like I was drinking water, and he knew that if I drank wine like that, I would either be under pressure or something was bothering me. And that time, I had forgotten that it was the day that Frank would take out trash. I was in so much stress. I told Frank that it was nothing to worry about, and I left him there in the kitchen and went to the bedroom. My mind came back later that it was the day that Frank had to take out the trash. I rushed to the kitchen and found out that the trash can was empty. I looked for Frank and found him in the sitting room, looking at the pictures that Kristen had sent, and the letter was beside him. I knew there and then that I was in deep shit. I knew that my marriage was over. Frank couldn't even look me in the eyes. He was furious, and I knew what was going to come next when he was like that. His eyes were full of rage, hatred, and hurt. I had hurt my husband and destroyed my marriage in the most humiliating way. I hated myself and still do hate myself for that. But I had to try and explain why I had done what I did and apologize, right? So the next day, when I had seen that he was no longer enraged like he was the previous night, I asked to speak to him. I was glad that as much as his tempers kept coming back, but he was not violent, well, at least towards me. So I explained everything to him from point A to point Z. I tried making him understand that I didn't do what I did on purpose, and it wasn't my intention to destroy what we had. Instead of listening to me, he went to our bedroom and took out all my clothes. I knew the words he wanted to say already, so I decided to not fight him, but apologize and give him some space, with the hope that he would calm down and let us fix things. I mean, we were both wrong. Yes, he didn't cheat on me. Or at least I didn't know or had the evidence that he was really not cheating on me. But we were both wrong, and we had to come to terms with our mistakes and fix them like a married couple, you know? I love my husband a lot, and being away from him made me realize how naive and careless I was to do what I did to him. About 2 months later, Frank came to my apartment and asked that we could talk, so I agreed. Both of us confessed everything. Well, more like I confessed everything that I was doing with Kristen. He also confessed that he had been staying at his apartment because he wanted to be away from me. He confessed that his actions were selfish, but what he had discovered about me really broke him. We said a lot to each other, and he listened attentively. I think he understood the damage his mistrust had caused, the pain he had inflicted upon me. As I was torn between the love I felt and the betrayal I had endured, I decided to give Frank a chance. I mean, I was the one who made the big mistake here, so it was only fair to stay and fix our relationship. I recognized that his suspicions had stemmed from his own insecurities and fears, rather than any wrongdoing on my part. I agreed to work on rebuilding our relationship, but only if we both committed to healing and regaining the trust we had lost. With the help of a couples therapist, we embarked on a journey of self-reflection and open communication. We learned to address our insecurities, to listen to one another's fears, and to rebuild the foundation of trust that had crumbled. Our love began to heal, but scars remained. Frank is now acutely aware of the cost of suspicion and mistrust. He vowed to be more understanding and open in our relationship. While I am still carrying the pain of the accusations and betrayal I had done, I chose to forgive, recognizing that rebuilding trust would take time and effort from both of us. We learned that love requires vulnerability, honesty, and a willingness to confront one's own fears and insecurities. We sought a new beginning. My husband and I love each other so much, and I believe that we will heal and be able to move on from everything. I don't know how to be free again without making my husband suspect that I would be doing something to destroy our marriage again. Please help me with advice and tips. No judgments, please.